Hello. Hello everyone. Sorry for the slight delay in contacting or starting the masterclass. I'm here now. Had a few people messaging me urgently just before, but everything's sorted now, so welcome. I'm going to turn the sound off here. If someone can just let me know that you can hear me and you can see me and everything is good and you can hear and you can see Ableton, that would be great. That'd be great if someone could just let me know that you can hear me and see me. Good. That's great news. How you doing, everyone? I hope you're all good. Yeah, so right, so yeah, this week we're talking about mixing. So let me go back to Ableton here, and let's just talk about how I would go about mixing this track down. But before that, I just want to talk about kind of the essentials of mixing, which you probably, which you have learned about on the course and you're learning about anyway. But I just want to talk about it from my perspective. Um, First thing that is the most important thing is that you have your own, um, your own studio with your own monitors that you trust and you know well, and you've treated that studio acoustically, and it sounds. And more important than anything else is that you know how your monitors sound and you know how music should sound through your monitors. Without that, it's very, very hard to get a good mix. So that's one thing that you just need to get before you can do a decent mix down. And once you've got that, you also need to give yourself some perspective on your track. So it's always, I think, a good idea to, although most of us kind of mix as we go along, especially if we're making electronic music, we do, quite a lot of the mixing as we go along. It's always good to have a final mix down with a little bit of perspective, maybe when you haven't heard the track for a few days at least, maybe a week, and you can come back and you can focus 100% with your technical head on the mix. Now, something that I want to make really, really important as well is really, really clear, which is really important, is that, a lot of people, when they're first discovering EQ, compression, that kind of stuff, and I get a lot of students do this, they do some really drastic stuff to their work and they make it, much worse than it was before. These are powerful tools. They can shape the sound, they can change the sound in powerful ways, and it's far easier to make things sound worse if you don't have experience than it is to make them sound better. So you have to really just ask yourself when you're first learning to use mixing tools, do I need this? Do I really need to do this? And then you need to constantly give yourself an A/B comparison of whether you're making something sound better. So it's constantly, checking what you're doing against what you had before. And sometimes, it really is just about a tiny, subtle tweaking as well. A lot of you students, and on this course as well, send me stuff, and they've been working on it, and because they've picked really good sounds in the first place, they've got a nice kick drum, they've got nice drum sounds, they've got nice synth sounds. It really is just a matter of tweaking stuff a little bit rather than going crazy with the mix. And a lot of people also forget the most important thing about mixing is balancing levels. People try and fix stuff with EQ and compression and all that kind of stuff, whereas all they really need to be doing is changing the fader levels. So really, my philosophy anyway, some people like to, obviously if you're talking about a big pop record, then a lot of processing has to go into it to make it sound super polished, super professional. But my philosophy is very much to do the minimum. So you find the best sounds in the first place, and you just get the balances right, and then you just mix to, emphasize certain things, to fatten up certain things, sometimes to correct certain things. Um, but it's very much just about, you know, putting the not even the icing on the cake. It's very much about just kind of tweaking what's there already a bit, especially with dance music and electronic music. Um, so look, let's with that in mind, let's go and think about this track, and I'll show you some tools that I use for mixing down. So I'm going to go back into session view, and I'm going to go back to um, where we've got everything in here. So uh, I remember now that I need to trigger. Maybe I'll actually take a loop in the arrange page. It's going to be easier. Okay, so let's mix down this bit here. So I'm just going to move this to here like this. I'm just going to take like that, and I'm going to put loop on here, and now I'm just going to mix this down with the elements we've got here. And I think I'm doing it on headphones, but I think it's okay. The balance is okay anyway. So we have this kick, absolutely no processing to the kick so far. I don't know why my reverse kick is like that. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually solo that kick like this and listen to it by itself. Let's go back into here, get this looping. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put an EQ on that kick. So just going to go into my audio effects here, and EQ8 is the one for EQing everything this way. I'm going to have a little look at this kick, right? Okay, so the first thing is, a lot of people do this, and I do it sometimes, is just take out everything below a certain level so we don't have any frequencies. Although this kick is actually quite clean anyway, to be honest. We have a sub kick as well, so let's have a little listen to the sub kick in conjunction with that. Okay, so the sub kick is an offbeat. Okay, so that's quite a nice kick, but I'm noting that there's not that many sub frequencies in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a corpus in between there and the EQ, because I still want to keep that EQ to get rid of any of the real subs that I don't need. So I'm going to put that at 20 Hz, 21 Hz, something like that. We don't need anything below 21 Hz. Possibly we don't need anything below 30 Hz, but I like to keep that real low end there, even though most sound systems can't really reproduce that. Let's put that on 30. And now I'm going to get a corpus. I like this corpus. It's a lot of fun actually. And if you're, a lot of people talk about layering kicks, which is great, but you can use the corpus to layer your kick drum, put a sub layer into your kick drum, and it normally works out quite well, and you can tune it a lot more than you could something else. So, and it's using the original sound. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to select a preset. So you've actually got one called sub boom, sub kick maker. So I can just drop that in between there, and then when I play that, okay, that's obviously quite extreme, but I can bring that right down there. Can you hear the amount of subs that's added to my kick there? I'm going to mix the dry and wet because that's quite extreme, so I'm just going to have that on about . Okay, so that's really kind of fattened up that kick drum already. I can put that afterwards, and that's going to make it a lot more boomy, so it really matters what order you have your effects in. I mean, I quite like that afterwards actually, after the EQ. see the difference before the EQ and after the EQ. It's definitely tighter down there though. Okay, so that's made quite a big difference already. So let's A/B that. Obviously made that kick a lot louder as well, but you know, we could do with that maybe. That's made that kick a lot bigger. So next thing that I'm going to do, I could, if I wanted, boost some of the frequencies around here, but I really don't need to now. If I wanted a really big kick, a thumping kick drum, I could do that, but then I'd probably have to turn it down a bit. And now we can hear it with the other drums. Let's hear it with some of the other drums. Maybe turn it down a lot more like that. Okay, so that's now a little bit more of a dirty, big kick drum. So now I'm going to add a little bit of saturator on it. I always like saturator. It's a little bit of analog distortion, basically. So it's somewhere between a compressor and distortion. It's like what would happen if you, you saturate a channel on a mixing desk or on a tape or something. So I'm just gonna. It used to be one, yeah, a bit warmer is going to be my starting point there. Obviously, that's very, very excessive. I don't want that. I'm going to change this to analog clip. Yeah. So it's just like a nice analog clip. And then I'm going to turn the dry and wet down. Turn the drive down. I just want a subtle little bit of difference there. And now that's quite a big kick drum now. Okay, so yeah, I'm happy with that. It's definitely more banging than it was. So now I'm gonna turn that open hi-hat up, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look at this now. So let's do a little bit of EQ on the open hi-hat. So I'm gonna grab EQ 8 again there. Okay, the first thing is I do not need any of those low, and this is quite a clean hi-hat. Sometimes you get a hi-hat with a lot of these low frequencies in. This does have some, but not many. So I'm just going to get rid of all the frequencies that I don't need out of that hi-hat. And then I'm just going to get this here. And I'm just going to put a little bit of a boost in the frequencies that I see as the I quite like that there. So just to emphasise that hi-hat. And then I've got that glitch hat as well. I'm not too bothered about EQing that at the moment. So now let's look at the clap. Where's the clap in this track? It's all the way over here. Okay, so I'm going to do the same kind of process here. EQ that. Get rid of all these low frequencies I don't need. So I've just taken all them out. Definitely don't need them. Let's make this one. Get rid of all these. Just put one in here like that. Okay, that's quite nice there. And then I could pan the hat, and maybe I could have two different hats with claps with different EQ on them if I wanted to do something more interesting. Pan them hard left and hard right. So I just take this here. Let's get rid of all this stuff. Just get this clap here, and then just Command D. Have one that is hard left, hard right. So I'm going to go into my panning here, left, right, like that, and then I've got two claps. And maybe I could do something a bit different with this one. So yeah, we've got a slightly different thing going on this side. So maybe put reverb on one side to give a bit more of a stereo feel. So now we've added a little bit of a stereo image to that clap. And now let's look at this little break beat we've got here, which is here. And I remember we've EQ'd this already using this EQ3, but we've got a filter sweep on it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to compress this a little bit actually. So when you're just starting out, it's fine to just like head into one of the presets and just go, oh, hold on a minute. What I want actually is, you know, catch peaks, for example, or a gentle limiter, so, or make it loud. So I'm just going to put that on there like that. Turn the makeup gain up a bit. So maybe try a different thing to that. Guitar. Right, so I'm going to go to the traditional compressor here. Not the glue one, and just drop that on instead. So I'm just going to drop that there instead. I don't want them both going together, so I'm going to get rid of that one. I want a longish attack and some subtle compression on here, just to keep the level. Okay, that sounds nice. I don't really need to do much more than that. I'm going to turn that low frequency up. There's too many low frequencies in there coming in for me. And just give A-B comparison. So I'm just catching the peaks there. I'm not doing anything really. Let's listen to that by itself. I just want to make sure that I can't hear the compressor working. So I don't want to hear any pumping or anything like that on this. So what I want to hear is, let's go back to here. Okay, so I can't hear any pumping there, so I've just basically leveled that out throughout the track. So you know, when the filter is lower down, it's not compressing so much because there's more sound. Yeah, so when the filter is up, it's compressing more. So it's kind of just leveling it out across the track volume wise. So that's kind of worked for me there. So let's listen to that A-B, that's fine, and then kick. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So now I just really want to kind of look at the bass line now, because we've got all these extra bass frequencies from the kick drum. So Let's have a little look at the bass line. Okay, so let's have a look at the frequencies of this bass line. I'm going to grab a EQ 8 here. Okay, so I can see there's a load of stuff that we don't need that's just going to be muddying up the mix there straight away. So I could probably even put that on like 30 or something. We don't need anything below 30 Hertz on this bass line. I mean, Fabric London sound system goes down to about 30 Hertz. Okay, so that sounds a little bit cleaner. So my headphones, I only just bought a new thing for my HD25s and they're going again. Okay, so that sounds better like that. Okay, so I'm just thinking what I could do to this bass line. I maybe sidechain this bass line a little bit to the kick drum actually. So I'm just going to set this up here, hit this arrow here, turn sidechain on, and I'm going to set, what I'd normally do is I'd set up a dummy kick drum track that goes all the way through the track so that it doesn't kind of stop during the breakdowns and stuff, so that it's always sidechaining to the kick drum even when there isn't a kick drum playing. So I would just grab, let's do it now anyway, so I'll just grab this, let's copy this track here, like this here, and let's have this kick drum running all the way through like that, and just call that sidechain like that. And what I'd make sure that that was not, so in my track that nothing is soloed, like this. I would have this track so it's not playing, but it's always compressing. It's always compressing my bass line, even in the breakdowns. So that's my sidechain there. So I'm going to start using that now to compress my bass line. So bass line here. So sidechain there. Okay, I can see that's actually, I can see that's already working, right? But what I want to hear is when and sometimes, okay, you want to hear it pumping you want to hear the compressor pumping for special effect, but I don't want to hear the pops and the clicks of that compressor. Like sometimes you can hear it working and that's not a very pleasant sound. You don't want that in your music. So I'm just going to put on the compressor here. I'm just going to listen to what it's sounding like under the compressor. And I can turn the ratio up for a more drastic side chain, but I can start to hear that popping and clicking now. I can change, see when I turn the attack down, I can start to hear that popping and clicking. I don't want that. So I'm going to turn that up until I don't get that anymore. I quite like having the release on auto. So there we go, some quite slow, subtle side chaining. And I've turned it up as well. So now when we hear the bass, maybe that's a bit, still hear that. Working away there. Okay, so let's hear that with the kick drum. And that's just moving the bass slightly out of the way of the kick drum. So we're getting a louder bass, but we're also getting the kick drum cutting through there. And then, so there's a few other elements that I would go in EQ, but we're kind of running out of the time now for the construction, the demonstration. But those basic elements that I've done, as you can hear, have kind of just emphasised the low end of the track, the mid-range in the in the things that the mid-range needs emphasising in. Brought the bass line out a little bit more in the mix. So I've just kind of fattened things up and made things a little bit. It's still a pretty raw sounding groove, but I've made it so it just kind of sounds a little bit fuller and bigger, and I haven't done a great deal to it, but I've just kind of really tweaked it a little bit and added some oomph, shall we say, to it. Okay, so look, that's the end of demonstration time. It's kind of time for your questions now, so fire away, people. Right, so does the times 4 LPF HPH generate more resonance than a normal filter? No, so no. The answer is the answer is to that question. It's not about resonance. It's about how steep the filter is. So it's about how many decibels it reduces, or how many decibels it reduces per octave. So 24 decibels per octave or 48 decibels per octave is quite a steep filter, whereas 12 decibels per octave is not so steep. So if you look at it on the filter here, this is a graphical representation of the frequencies going horizontally like that. So when I put it on the normal one, it's the frequencies say, right, so let's put this up here. The frequencies around 20 hertz are still there quite a lot. 16 all the way down there, you still got those frequencies coming through. If I change it to times 4, then it cuts off those frequencies suddenly. So by the time you're down to 23 hertz, you've got no frequencies coming through whatsoever. So it's about the steepness of how it cuts off the frequencies. So normally it's a lot subtler, it's a lot more kind of smooth sounding. So that's really, letting frequencies well below the point, the cut-off point below. It's letting a lot of frequencies out, so it's a lot subtler, a lot less drastic. Hopefully that kind of explains it there. Is Corpus just used for sub? No, you can use Corpus for doing quite a lot of cool stuff. But I mainly, to be honest, use it on the subs. If you just look at some of the presets in the Corpus, you've got drum reso gate, drum to bass synth, kick loose, loop. Yeah, so it's kind of like a physical modelling, almost like a physical well, it's a physical modelling plugin. So it's like an effect that will actually create sounds over time. I mean, realistic sounds. So it's like using a membrane or a string or a pipe or a tube. So it's using physical modelling synthesis to add additional sounds to the sounds which are coming through. So it's quite a clever bit of it's quite a clever plugin. So you can have a lot of fun with it. So by all means, don't just use it on kick drums for subs. Have a little play around with it, and you will find that you get quite a lot of cool stuff out of it. But for me, normally I do use it for adding sub to a kick drum. In fact, a lot of times I prefer using that than just layering kicks, because it's using the original kick drum and adding subs to it, so I can tune it very easily and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. So that's a tighter EQ curve means it cuts a bigger chunk of the frequencies. So yeah, it's how many frequencies, how much of how many decibels per octave it cuts the frequencies at. Yeah, exactly. Nice one, Charles Logan. Um, the left-right feature on EQ8. Are there any practice? My mix stays muddy in the center, and this alleviates that. But I don't know how. So, so you're talking? Are you talking about the left-right? When I had two separate channels, and I had one panned hard left and one um, panned right. Was that what you're talking about there? Um, or are you talking about this thing here? If you could just clarify that question, it would be great. Right, do you cut the lower frequencies of every instrument to minus 30 hertz? Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't a lot of the time, just because the instruments are quite clean down there anyway. But if you have, if you're using a lot of analog kit, or you're using field recordings, or stuff which has been synthesized in a certain way, and quite often you do get a little bit of that kind of unwanted frequencies below 30 hertz. So it's a good idea to cut them out, because what happens is there's no sound system really in the world that really goes down to 20 hertz. The human hearing goes to 20 hertz, and 20 hertz is more feeling than hearing. Now, even the top club sound systems normally go down to about 30 hertz. Some headphones go from 20 hertz, but like I said, you can't really even um, hear it, so it's not necessary. And the thing is about those low frequency waves is that they take up a lot of energy, so you want to reduce the energy that something's taking up, because there's only so much energy that can be going on through a speaker system, or in that kind of thing. So what you want to do is you want to reduce the energy, and a good way of reducing that energy is bringing down the cutting everything below 30 hertz. So yes, if you've got a lot of stuff that's muddy, or a lot of stuff that's going on below the 30 hertz, then yeah, cut it out. Yeah, good. I think that's a good way. Hopefully that makes sense. I knew a steeper filter would filter out more sound, but I just thought besides filtering it, it generates more resonance as the filter gets deeper. It only would generate more right. So resonance is like a peak of, so it doesn't create a peak of frequencies around the cutoff point. It just changes the cutoff point. When you're changing resonance, you're creating a peak around the cutoff point. So you're actually boosting the frequencies around the cutoff point. The steepness of the filter doesn't do that. It's still pretty much keeps everything at the cut-off point at naught, and everything below goes like that. Whereas resonance, you're boosting the cut-off point like that, if that makes sense. Yeah, corpus is good, Charles. It's good. It's good. I use it quite a lot on kick drums. You can really fatten up kick drums and to some degree bass lines and other things with it. So I think it's a great bit of kit. I love it. Do you mind about Phil? Right, so do you mind about filter gain? Filter gain low frequencies after compressing. Does the compression generate more low frequencies as it compresses the dynamic range? Well, so look, that's once again, it depends on what you're compressing and stuff like that. Yeah, of course it will. If the source material you're compressing has got lower volume, um, you know, you know, low frequencies, which are kind of lower in the mix or whatever, then it's going to boost them up. So it could do potentially, yes. It depends on the source material. So if you find that you are getting more low frequencies after compression, then yes, you can EQ again after compression. So it's just one of those things you have to play it by ear, and depending on the source material, you can get different results out of a compressor and the settings of the compressor. So yeah, I mean there is no right answer to that. If you're compressing a drum loop that has got a subby 808 kick drum in it, which is quite low in the mix in the drum loop, obviously when you compress that, you're going to get loads more kind of sub bass frequencies coming through because it's turning that up, if that makes sense. Oh, okay, so yeah, okay, so the drop down mode. I mean, I would normally leave that in stereo, to be honest. Um, that is, it's just about the way that left and right channels work with each other. Stereo is not always about hard left and hard right. So yeah, I would just probably leave that in stereo. I have never really had any much you know chance of changing that. And if I do want to EQ left and right separately, I do what I did um, with my clap, and I just panned one hard left and I panned one hard right, and I had them on separate channels, and that just gives me a lot more kind of control. Any tips on having a good stereo image along the track in general? Right, so if you want to get really advanced with stereo image, then you have to start thinking about psychoacoustics. And psychoacoustics is far more than just left and right. It's about 3D imagery. So it's all about the way that things sound in someone's ears when a sound is coming from a different space. So, for example, if I have something coming from that side of the room where there's a wall and my head is facing that way, I'm going to get a lot more kind of reverb coming from that side maybe than I am from that side, or not a lot more, but a reasonable amount of reverb. If there's different substances on that side of the room to that side of the room, then different frequencies are going to get absorbed by you, you know by absorbed affecting the reverb. So you can have slightly different reverb settings coming from one side to the other side. Also, if my head is facing that way, I've got a sound coming from over there. It's going to hit that ear directly, but it's going to have to go through the sound through my head, and my head's in the way of what's coming on through that side. So I'm going to get a slightly different EQ'd sound on my left side. I'm also going to get more reflections on my left hand side. So there's a lot of clever stuff that goes into making a stereo image rather than just left and right. So it's more about creating a 3D image, and there are plugins which kind of can do this stuff for you. But you can get quite creative as well if you want, to maybe have two different reverbs and then put an EQ over one of the reverbs on the left channel and then a different one on the right channel. And you can do some cool stuff yourself just by messing around with things. Having things slightly EQ'd differently on left and right and all that kind of stuff can create some cool effects. Okay, so yeah, this you can use a bracket EQ everything, and I know quite a lot of people that do bracket EQ everything. Actually, that's just using the same philosophy as I was before, but uh, taking out everything that's above and below the frequencies you need. However, you do need to be careful with it because people end up taking out presence, which is vitally important, um, out of sounds where they don't need to take the presence out of sounds. So certain sounds may have very few high frequencies going on, like a mid-range bass line, but those higher frequencies can add a little bit of brightness and presence to the sound, which if you start EQing all of them out, you can end up with stuff which doesn't have that kind of presence or that sharpness or that brightness that maybe you do want. But yeah, it just depends how much you want to really start cutting into sounds. I do know people that they do use bracket EQ on everything, so they're just everything apart from a certain frequency range of everything. So let's look at this percussion is taken out basically. It's not something that I focus on so much, but so here's our percussion here. We haven't looked at that yet anyway, so let me go on here. Let's get an EQ8. Let me just open this up. I'm just going to go to my EQ8 here. Okay, so okay, that's quite a wide range of sounds anyway, but I could, right, for example here, I could put that on there like that, cut everything below there, and then I'm going to get rid of all these, and I'm going to put, and I see people doing that quite a lot, but some people do it, if I have it down there, and then I've cut down a lot of that brightness, you hear that brightness is, and even just going from 10k around there to there can add quite a lot of brightness. So yeah, do it by all means, but be careful that you're not getting rid of the presence of things. That's it's something you really don't want to get rid of. You can end up with quite a muddy, quite a lot of muddy mixes just because you've done that. That's a good question. When would you use a stereo imager over a parallel channel panned hard left and hard right? That's quite a cool question. Well, I mean, stereo images are good, right? Because they're creating kind of artificial stereo that's quite mono compatible. So when would I use it? Well, if I wanted a wider stereo image and Isotope do some really cool stuff, which is about adding artificial, what's it called? I think it's just called stereo imager, which adds artificial stereo image to stuff. So maybe if you've got a mix, I've done it before when I've done a mix and it hasn't been that good mono compatibility. I've kind of monoed things and then I've added artificial stereo imaging to things. You're saying you can't hear Ableton anymore? Oh, that's weird. Let me check my preferences. I should be able to hear Ableton. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe it's just a bit quiet, but I can see it's coming through here. Any tips for mixing sub, kick, for a tight and fat low end, especially as the sub and kick sounds at the same time. Right, so yeah, I mean, side chaining would be the obvious one. Um, some people like to separate the frequencies, but I'm a big fan. I think when you want a really subby mix, it's good to have those sub frequencies happening at the same time. It's just about, for me, it's just about balancing level, you know. But you can maybe take some of the. Oh, some people do it different ways. Some people take subs out the kick drum and let the bass cut through, and some people take some of the subs out of the bass and let the kick drum cut through. So it really just depends on the track and how it sounds. But the important thing is you've got great monitors that can represent that sub, that low, those low frequencies. And once you're in front of those monitors, then start using tools like side chaining and EQ and that kind of stuff to to really start getting those sub basses sounding good. That's the important thing, that you can actually fully hear. Um, you hear your sub frequencies, because there's a lot of monitors that don't. You just can't hear those frequencies. Yeah, I try to monitor everything I can. It seems like it gives it more space. I mean, yeah, that's a kind of, um, in, in the old school where we had analog mixers, you would keep. It's really important to have your bass and your kick drums and everything like that in mono. Um, whereas now it's a little bit different. People don't think about that so much. So yeah, obviously, everything with any low frequencies in it, should be mono. You shouldn't ever pan your kick drums. You shouldn't ever pan your bass line. Although maybe some people break those rules, but for me, that's one of those rules that you shouldn't really break. Keep your bass frequencies in mono. You can't hit. The thing is about the bass frequencies that you can't really hear them in stereo anyway. Even if your sound. That's why you get a subwoofer. You don't get stereo subwoofers. You get a subwoofer, because it's a high frequencies, which are much shorter sound waves that have a lot more kind of direction. Whereas bass, you just hear bass coming from all around you, if that makes sense. I have a lot of issues when getting side chains in a proper rhythm. Uh, yeah, so it depends what you're side chaining. Side chaining, in my experience, works best with a 4/4 kick drum. I mean, you can use it in other places as well, but it works really well with a 4/4 kick drum. Once things get a little bit more complicated with your kick drums or your low frequencies, um, it can start to become a little bit more problematic. Is that what you're referring to? Um, so What's the most challenging thing for me when you're mixing music, right? So I think the most challenging thing is when you lose objective, when you become so kind of locked into your own mix, and you've spent too much time making a track, and you've lost perspective. That's when, yeah, that's when things start to become hard. To do a decent mix down, you have to be objective. And the thing is about music is we become very emotionally attached to our music. We become, before I've had like certain things that I know don't work in the track, they don't work in the mix, and because I'm so attached to those things, I've tried to kind of shoehorn them into the mix, which just won't work. I need to sack them. So you need to be objective, have that perspective on things. If you have the perspective, then you can just kind of, be, like I said about 10 times now, objective and go, right, that doesn't work, that needs this needs that. So it's kind of switching from being an artist to an engineer. And if I've been working on a track for 3 weeks or 3 days even, and I'm doing the mix down, the self doubt has started kicking in, and all that kind of stuff. That's when it's difficult. If I go into a mix clean, clear headed, and I haven't heard the track for a little while, then I've got perspective. It's much easier to do the mix down. Yeah, gain automation. I use that quite a lot as well. Instead of side chaining, just doing a little bit of gain and clip volume automation. Uh, so yeah, you can get the plugins like Volume Shaper or LFO tool, but I'm telling you, shoehorn with that volume. You know what? If just sometimes it's that simple. If something's not working, you just sack it. Find something better. That's really, really important in music. Is when we become a little bit sentimental about something. Like, I must have that bass line. I love that bass line. If it's not working in that track, save that bass line and make another track with it. If you're if that that vocal doesn't work with that track, take that vocal and put it in your loop library and use it later. It's really it's good to be quite brutal with our own work sometimes. If you went to an engineer, they would have no qualms. They wouldn't get sentimental about how things have to be. They would try and make it the best it can be, I suppose, is the key. Yeah, and that stuff, Charles, is good, right? If it sounds good, it sounds good. It's that is really good, and sometimes to use a little bit of EQ automation or filter automation is good when you have certain synths which have got resonant peaks and they're going to the low frequencies. That kind of stuff can be very, very useful. So it sounds like you're doing well, man. Yeah, that's the good thing about live. It is intuitive and it does help you find these little tips and tricks just by the way that it's kind of set out. And it's you can automate anything in live, pretty much anything. So if you can do it and it works, then do it. I think is the key. Okay, so look, we've got 2 minutes left. Maybe yeah, a little bit more because I started 1 minute late. So we've got 3 till 1 minute past left. So I'm sure you've got a few questions for me. Right, so advice on assignment delivery. Right, so make sure you read the um, you know make sure you read the brief. That's really really important. So make sure a lot of people have handed in assignments that don't even kind of meet the brief, especially the written one. So make sure you've read the brief, you're familiar with it. Also, please make sure that you're able to project loads with the samples on another computer or just on your computer out of the self-contained, the collect all and save um, project and send the project. They're the bigger things that I get is people sending projects I can't listen to. And also, just to be safe, always send a WAV or MP3 of the final mix down with the track. That's it, really. I mean, and don't use third-party plugins. Okay, so Charles, thanks, man. I've kind of hovered around a lot of the topics we're covering, and you've really put things into perspective. All right, mate, brilliant. Well, all right, everyone, brilliant. Look, it's always a pleasure, guys, and look forward to catching up with you in the one-to-ones. Any questions about assignments, and you want to go into more details, please do hit me up in the one-to-ones. Like you said, we're getting close now, so look, peace out, people, and I'll see you all